Chapter 2, Central Asia. On the 12th of April 1829, Humboldt, Rose, and Ehrenberg departed from Berlin for St. Petersburg. They had arranged the different branches of science to which each was to devote himself. Ehrenberg was to attend to the botany and zoology of the countries through which they would pass. Rose was to analyze the minerals and keep the traveling diary, while Humboldt undertook the magnetic observations, the results of geographical astronomy, and the geology and natural history generally. To show the respect in which he held him before he started, the King of Prussia appointed Humboldt as an acting privy councillor. It was a rank of minister, and his title thenceforth was Excellency. His Excellency the Baron von Humboldt. On their way from Berlin to St. Petersburg, the travelers passed through Königsberg and Dorpat, Estonia, and Livonia. As the seashore in the neighborhood of Königsberg abounded with amber, it was almost a forbidden ground to inhabitants. It was farmed out at a high rate and carefully guarded so that the fishermen could only put out to sea at certain prescribed points of the coast. The coast between Danzig and Memel was let out to a rich contractor for $10,000 a year. His magazine contained, at the time the travelers visited them, 150,000 pounds of amber. Being highly inflammable, it was kept in vaulted rooms, which were secured with iron doors. They arrived at St. Petersburg on the 1st of May, and found everything in readiness for their journey. Carriages, couriers, and horses were placed at the disposal of the Count Cancerin. A military escort was provided for them, and even their residents on the way were selected. A Russian mining officer was appointed as Humboldt's companion to give him information regarding the roads and localities, and to see that the authorities performed what was required of them. The travelers remained some time in St. Petersburg in order to see the sights before they commenced their journey. They visited the public institutions of the capital, and most of the show places in their vicinity, as might have been expected from their tastes and the objects of their journey. They were attracted by the mineralogical collections of St. Petersburg and the size and splendor of the crown jewels. The largest of these jewels was at the top of the imperial scepter. It weighed 194 3/4 carats, and its greatest diameter was 1 inch 3½ lines. Formerly in the possession of Nadir Shah, whose throne it long endured, it was brought with other jewels after his death by an Armenian at Baghdad for 50,000 piastres. From this Armenian, it was purchased by Catherine II at the price of 450,000 silver rubles, and at patent of nobility. On the 20th of May, the parties started for Moscow. Besides a courier and mining officer already mentioned, they were furnished with a Russian cook, and in stations before Moscow, travelers were obliged to cook for themselves. The broad highway between St. Petersburg and Moscow was soon traversed, and they halted for a few days in the old capital of Muscovy. After making some barometric observations and examining the geology of the country, they continued their journey over a marshy level until they reached Nizhny Novgorod on the Volga. Here they met with Count Polya, the owner of several large mining estates in the Ural, and as he was on his way thither, he joined the party. They embarked on the Volga at the last of May and reached Kazvan on the 4th of June. Originally the seat of a Tartar Khanate, which was overturned in 1552 after flourishing for 300 years, Kazan was inhabited by the Tartars, especially in the suburbs. The travelers visited the temples of these Tartars to see their form of worship. Their guides removed their slippers as they entered, but as the travelers wore boots, they were permitted to keep them on. The party remained at Kazan 5 days, during which they made several excursions in the neighborhood. The most interesting of these was to the ruins of Bulgar, the capital of ancient Bulgaria. As they drew near the modern village where they met by groups of men, women, and children, the whole population came forth to meet them. At the head of these groups walked the oldest inhabitants, who then came to Humboldt, offered him bread and salt as a token of reverence, according to Russian custom. Dismissing these good people when their hospital's little ceremony was over, the travelers proceeded to the ruins. Of the old capital. They found the walls of some buildings still standing, 2 towers, and a number of tombstones, bearing monumental inscriptions in Turkish, Arabic, and Armenian. These inscriptions dated back to the year 623 of the Hegira, AD 1226. Silver and copper coins and copper rings and trinkets were sometimes found in the rubbish of Bulgar. There were several tombs among the ruins. They were objects of veneration to the faithful. They were the tombs of the Tartar saints, who, as the Tartars generally were anything but saints, were undoubtedly in their time the cream of Tartars. The travelers found a mullah performing his devotions at one of the tombs. He repeated his form of prayer and bowed his body without being disturbed by their presence. They offered him a seat in their carriage, from which he accepted, as the ruins were some distance from each other, and he managed each time they stopped to finish his devotions. Perhaps they finished their examinations. Devotion was a good thing, so was a comfortable ride. Returning to Kazan, they witnessed the Saban, a Tartar festival, celebrated each year after seed time. The Tartars wrestled with each other and ran foot races and galloped their horses at full speed. It was a scene of barbaric merriment. They left Kazan on the 9th and passed through a district inhabited by the Wachaks. This tribe was a branch of a family of Finns. They had embraced Christianity and spoke the Russian language. Although they retained the customs of their ancestors, the women wore high caps of birch bark, covered with blue cloth, bedecked with fringes, hung with silver coins. On the 12th, they reached the estate of Count Bolia at Werchte, Molenstic, where they halted to partake of his hospitality. From Werchte and Molenstic, they journeyed to Chekethenberg. The count accompanying them near Permanenburg. Perm, they fell in with a county of exiles on the way to Siberia. This party consisted of 60 or 80 women and girls, and as they were not fettered, they were probably banished for trivial offenses. The worst class of criminals were always fettered while on their way to Siberia, being fastened by one hand to a long rope. The journey that the travelers overtook was escorted by a band of armed and mounted Bashkirs. The postmaster at Malmush was a neurologist with a taste for anatomy. For around and within his house were the teeth and bones of an immense mammoth, found on the banks of the Washtaq. On the 14th the travelers reached the outskirts of Ural, a series of delicious valleys, where they left the Neva. 3 weeks before it was crusted with snow. Now grass was out, the plants were in full bloom, and the ground was profusely covered with flowers. On the 15th, they arrived at Yekaterinburg. Yekaterinburg was situated among the mountains on the Asiatic side of the Ural Ridge. This ridge consisted of nearly parallel lines whose nearest points rose to the height of nearly 5,000 feet. Its direction in the meridian, which was in lines standing perpendicular among the equator from the pole, reminded Humboldt of a similar situation in the chain of the Andes. The northern and central portions of the Ural Mountains contained gold and platania, and abounded in minerals of all kinds. The party remained at Yekaterinburg 4 weeks, making excursions to the mines in its vicinity. They visited the gold mines of Shabrovsky and Borovsk, and the copper mines of Gimoshki, and penetrated as far as northward as Nizhnetaslisk, and the whole district for some 8,000 square versts belonged to the Demidov family. Their ancestor, Nikita Dimov, was a common blacksmith at Tula, poor and obscure, until Peter the Great in 1702 made him a present of Magnetberg, a recently discovered magnetic mountain, and the iron forges of Nujansk. This was the foundation of Nishtazglisk and the fortunes of the family. Nishtazglisk was one of the richest mining districts in the world. At 2 versts distance and from it stood the Magnetsperd, which supplied all the surrounding forges with ore, and in the immediate neighborhood were copper ores and mines of gold and platina. Between Tashnero Istrulisk and Kushvisk, a lofty plateau separated the waters of Europe and Asia. On the east rose the springs of Bobrovska, a rivulet flowing into the Tegel. On the west, those of the Wizard, which flowed into the Yuska and Swascha. Near the center of this plateau stood a majestic pine with the words Asia and Europe carved on the right and left sides. It was the guidepost of the 2 continents. Not far from Kushvisk was the seat of the Imperial Ironworks. There was a second mountain of magnetic iron. It was called Gora Blaskostad, or the Blessed Mountain. Its existence was made known to the Russian spy of Vogel named Shumkin, who was afterwards burned alive on it by his enraged countrymen, the primitive inhabitants of the country. The Russians erected on the summit a monument to his memory.